For the revenue session, somewhat early, you will notice, to the chair of the next session, Kasim Afzal. Thank you.
Hello, conference. Could you all settle down, please, quickly? So we can start on item 13. Should be set speech for 15 minutes by somebody who I knew long ago on the Federal Conference Committee. Person that won the 2003 by-election, then went on to increase her vote in 2005. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please welcome the Liberal Democrat Shadow Housing Minister for Brent, Sarah Teather, MP. Thank you.
Conference, I blame the Labour Party for disengagement with politics. Sure, expenses has been a complete disaster and has made many people very, very angry, but actually, I don't think that that's where the rot set in. It set in 1997, just after the election. It started that day Tony Blair got in his ministerial car and travelled to one of the poorest estates in the country and pledged to stand up for the forgotten people. It started in that euphoria and relief that we all felt when we finally saw the back of the Tories. It started in the lonely journey of the loyal Labour voter who stuck with them in the dark days of the Tories and who heaved a sigh of relief when Labour finally came to power. It started then, because every promise Blair made that day has since been broken, discarded, or left to wither away. Labour forgot the forgotten people. They forgot the people who elected them. They forgot the people who needed them most. And I am left wondering, what is the point of a Labour government? They raise taxes on the poor. They let the poorest children fail at school. They stand idly by while families are destroyed by housing misery that they could easily fix. Labour's betrayal, conference, is where the rot set in. Their record speaks for itself. 1.8 million families languishing on housing waiting lists, 750,000 families in severe overcrowding, 1 in 10 children in my constituency in temporary accommodation. I have spoken to families in my constituency who have TB. One family member usually picks it up on their travels. But believe me, when you live in an overcrowded, damp Victorian hovel, it's not long before the whole family gets it. I have parents sharing beds with 8- and 9-year-old children because there's nowhere else for the child to sleep. 6 people in 2-bedroom flats, children with autism having to sleep in the living room with their brother, marriages devastated, education ruined. How do they get away with this? For 13 years. This is the Labour Party. This is what they have become. This is their legacy. I think the truth is that housing is a deeply personal issue. And that's why it's been swept under the carpet for so long. Until the government feel that they are losing votes over it, they think that they can go on, they can afford to keep ignoring it. A few weeks ago, the Evening Standard began a campaign highlighting the hidden misery of thousands of Londoners stuck in poverty and poor housing. And it felt for me like a chink of light. Finally, thank goodness, a newspaper campaigning on housing. We need to make housing a front-page story in every newspaper. It should be a political issue. It should decide how people vote. Labour, conference, Labour must not be allowed to get away with this. We will not allow Labour to get away with this. Under Nick Clegg, we will be the only party going into this election promising £1 billion investment in this country's housing stock. Because we understand that housing affects everything. You can't fix antisocial behaviour or underperformance at school if children have nowhere to play or to work in the evenings. It is no good having a great health service that deals with disease if the real cause of depression or chest disease or high blood pressure or whatever else is actually the hideous, stressful conditions in which people are living. This is fundamentally about fairness. Fairness for the poorest, fairness for our children, fairness for families. Liberal Democrats, if we don't make this case, nobody will. Let's face it, we're certainly not going to hear this from the Tories. The Tories, I'm afraid, don't know what they're talking about. They have no idea how the other 90% live. Scratch the surface of the old Tory party, and I'm afraid it's alive and well. A couple of weeks ago, the Conservatives issued a press release claiming that 50% of all teenage girls in deprived areas are pregnant. The figure was wrong. It was 5%. But of course, nobody in Conservative central office spotted the error because it fitted very well with their stereotypes about poor people. Just as it did when Chris Grayling claimed that our inner cities are all like the US show The Wire. They will do anything, say anything to peddle their broken Britain slogan. The Conservative Party love to demonise the poor. No, the Tories think the only way to solve the housing crisis is to change the law to make it easier for developers to stuff vulnerable families into tiny houses the size of shoeboxes. That and their persistent rumours about their secret plans to whack up rents for social tenants to market levels, private market levels. Now, that would be an absolute disaster. Last year, a young woman came to visit me in my advice surgery. She'd been on the housing waiting list for many years, and in the time in which she'd been waiting, she'd been desperately trying to sort her life out. She'd taken a degree, and she was desperate to be able to work full-time. But she couldn't afford to work. She couldn't afford to work full-time because if she did, she would lose the benefit that was paying for her exorbitant private rent. She did a calculation on the amount that she'd been paid in housing benefits over the previous years, and she came to me and she said, look, they could have built me a house with all of this. And that's the point, isn't it? You know, if you abolish subsidised rents for council and housing association properties, all that's going to happen is that many more people will end up in the position where they can't work. Many fewer people will be able to work, and many more people will be stuck in poverty. Put poor people into worse housing and make them pay more for it. That's it. That is the Tory big idea. Well, I don't want them in government. The Tories, of course, have been colluding with keeping housing off the political agenda because, let's face it, they have nothing to say. But what frustrates me most is that the government can do something about the appalling cases that I see in my advice surgery every week. This is not an insoluble problem. It isn't free, and it can't be fixed overnight, but it can be done. There are things that we would do, things we would do now. While millions of families wait for housing, 650,000 properties sit empty in England alone, empty, ignored, and slowly falling to pieces. I bet every one of you in this hall could think of a house near you where nobody lives in it. I bet you could think of one, and everybody in the country could think of one as well. It is a scandal that the government lets these precious homes rot. Empty properties are a scar on our communities. They invite squatting, antisocial behaviour, and bring down the whole street. Just think how a family living with overcrowding feels when they see a property all boarded up opposite them when they are living in the conditions that you know they are living in. It is time that we made use of the homes that we have. The Liberal Democrats will invest £1.4 billion in bringing 250,000 of these homes back into use. Think what that money could achieve. 50,000 builders, joiners, plumbers, electricians back in work. A shot in the arm for the construction industry. Streets across the country smartened up. Squatters replaced by families desperate for a home. That would be the difference under the Liberal Democrats. The alternative doesn't bear thinking about. When demand outstrips supply, prices go up. That's basic economics. I suspect even George Osborne could grasp that. But if we can't keep up with housing demand as we come out of recession, prices will go up, people will again borrow more than they can afford, and here we are again. We're back right where we started. If we lose all our construction workers in the recession because there is no work for them, we will never keep pace with the demand that there is for housing in this country. It's as if the government haven't learned a thing from the past 2 years. Investing in more housing will protect the economy and save a generation. By making this £1 billion promise, the Liberal Democrats throw down the gauntlet to Labour and the Tories to do the same. Liberal Democrats, we are the only party heading into this election promising to invest new money in housing. We need to win so that we can deliver the housing people so desperately need. The 1.8 million families languishing on the housing waiting list haven't won under Labour. The young couple still forced to live with their parents haven't won under Labour. The family living 6 to a room in conditions that should have been left in Victorian England have not won under Labour. Perhaps it was inevitable that the Labour Party would forget the forgotten people. The collectivist roots of the Labour Party lends easily to sweeping individual rights under the carpet in the name of the supposed greater good. Of course, the trouble is that the only greater good the Labour Party still believe in is winning their 4th term. They have forgotten that winning isn't just about winning. We won't forget the people who elected us, because that is the nature of our politics. People, individuals, their stories. It's at the heart of what liberal democracy is about. We will win for the people who need us most, and we will win where nobody expects us to. We will win because we can give people hope again. Hope that things can change. Hope for a fairer country. Hope for real justice for those stuck at the bottom. We can reignite hope in the millions of people who have given up on the power of politics to change their lives. We have the policies, the principles, and the passion to turn a disillusioned voter into a positive vote for change. And that's why when we are out day after day, knocking on doors, stuffing things through letterboxes and into envelopes, phoning people up, when we're using energy I bet you didn't really think you still had going, that's what keeps you going, that's what keeps me going. Because Conference Labour have failed, and the Tories haven't really changed. This is our time. We must deliver. Our job is to go out there and persuade people that voting changes things. So let's go out and do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah Teather, MP for Brent East. Thank you very much. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my aide, John Ball, and now I hand over to Ruth Pollard. Thank you very much.